The widow accepted a crooked house as payment from her employer, but the reason it leaned to one side changed her life forever. Emma was a widow with 6 children who were going hungry when her wealthy employer offered, as payment, an old crooked house nobody wanted. It leaned so much it looked ready to collapse, and everyone said it was cursed. Yet when she discovered why it was so tilted, when she finally opened the locked room that made the whole structure sink toward one side, she understood she had just received far more than a roof over her head, and that she would now have to defend with her own life, if necessary, what generosity had given her. Tell us in the comments below which city you're listening from, and let's begin the story. The day Emma Rivera saw her husband Daniel collapse in the middle of his woodworking shop, clutching his chest with one hand and staring in terror as pain exploded behind his eyes, she knew her life had just shattered into pieces. There was no time for goodbyes, no final words, only the dull thud of his body hitting the concrete floor, her strangled scream, and then the funereal silence that settled over their home like a permanent ghost. Daniel was 42, Emma 38, and they had 6 mouths to feed. Ethan 14, the 11-year-old twins, Matthew and Sam, 9-year-old Lucy, little Chloe, 7, and the baby, Noah, who had just turned 2. The first months were a slow descent into hell. The shop closed, the debts grew, and creditors started knocking, demanding payments Emma simply could not make. She sold Daniel's tools, the few decent pieces of furniture they owned, even her wedding ring, but nothing was enough. The small town of Riverside, where she had lived all her life, suddenly felt cold and hostile. Former friends watched her with pity, or worse, with barely concealed contempt. "Poor Emma," they whispered in the town square. "How is she going to support 6 children on her own?" One October afternoon, with an empty stomach and the kids crying with hunger at home, Emma walked out toward Laurel Ridge Estate on the outskirts of town. Laurel Ridge was a vast property belonging to Mrs. Estelle Campbell, a millionaire known throughout the region for her fortune and her difficult personality. People said she was a widow too, though her husband had died more than 20 years earlier. They said she was hard as stone and cold as ice, but they also said she paid well. Emma knocked on the service door with trembling hands. An older woman with a severe face opened and looked her up and down with suspicion. "What do you want?" she snapped. "I came to ask if you need help," Emma said, swallowing her pride as if it were broken glass. "I can clean, cook, whatever you need. I have 6 children and—" "Wait here," the woman cut in, slamming the door in her face. Emma waited under the merciless sun, feeling sweat run down her back and shame burn her cheeks. Nearly an hour later, the door opened again. This time it was someone else, a tall woman in her early 60s, dressed in simple but elegant clothes, her silver hair pulled back into a flawless bun. Her eyes were gray and piercing, as if they could read every secret Emma tried to hide. "You're the widow of Daniel Rivera," she said without preamble. It wasn't a question. "Yes, ma'am." "How many children do you have?" "6, ma'am." "And the youngest?" 2 years old, ma'am." Mrs. Estelle watched her in silence for what felt like an eternity, then gave a slight nod. "I need someone to clean, to cook, to take care of the big house. The work is hard and the hours are long. I don't tolerate laziness or excuses. Can you handle that?" "Yes, ma'am," Emma answered without hesitating, even though she had no idea how she would manage with Noah. "I can handle anything. The pay is fair. You start tomorrow at 6 in the morning. Don't be late." That was all. Mrs. Estelle closed the door and Emma almost ran back to her rented place, her heart pounding so strongly she thought it might burst. That night, for the first time in months, she was able to buy bread and milk for her children. She watched them eat with a mixture of relief and sadness that tightened her throat. The town's gossip, however, did not take long to begin. Emma Rivera, the respectable widow, was now working as a maid for the rich lady. What a disgrace! What a fall! Women gossiped in the market, in church, on every street corner. "She has no dignity," declared Mrs. Reynolds, the biggest busybody in Riverside. "I'd rather starve than stoop that low." Emma heard the comments and clenched her fists, but she didn't answer. She couldn't afford that luxury. Her children needed to eat. The first days at Laurel Ridge were exhausting. Emma arrived before sunrise, leaving Ethan in charge of his siblings, and didn't return until after dark. The main house was enormous, 3 stories tall, with more than 20 rooms, marble floors that had to be scrubbed on her knees, and massive windows that took hours to clean. Mrs. Estelle was demanding, yes, but not cruel. She watched Emma work with those unreadable grey eyes of hers, yet she never shouted or insulted her as Emma had feared. In fact, there was something strange about the way the older woman treated her. Sometimes, when Emma cleaned the library, she could feel the millionaire's gaze lingering on her. Other times, Estelle asked unexpected questions. "Your oldest son still in school? Is the baby healthy? What did your husband study?" Emma answered respectfully but honestly, and little by little something began to shift. Estelle started giving her clothes she no longer wore, old toys from her son for Noah, books for Ethan, small gestures that Emma accepted with overwhelming gratitude. One afternoon in November, while Emma swept the corridor on the 2nd floor, she heard raised voices coming from Estelle's study. It was her niece and nephew, Ryan and Fiona Campbell, who came to visit once a month under the pretense of checking on their aunt, though in truth they only wanted to make sure their inheritance remained intact. "Aunt, it's ridiculous for you to live alone in this huge house with only one maid," Ryan said in a syrupy voice. "You should come live with us in the city. We can take better care of you." "I don't need anyone to take care of me," Estelle replied, her voice dry as the desert. "Least of all you two, who are only waiting for me to die so you can divide what's left." The silence that followed was thick and icy. Emma froze with the broom in her hands, hardly daring to breathe. Then she heard the furious steps of the niece and nephew storming down the stairs, their voices dripping poison. "Stubborn old woman, we'll see who has the last word." That night, as Emma finished cleaning the kitchen, Estelle came in with a glass of water, sat at the table, something she never did, and watched her for a long time in silence. "Emma," she said at last, "what would you do if you had a lot of money and no children of your own?" The question took Emma by surprise. She set the cloth down in the sink and turned to her employer. "I don't know, ma'am. I suppose I'd make sure it didn't fall into the wrong hands." For the first time, Estelle smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was tired and sad. "You're smarter than you look," she murmured. Emma didn't know what to say, but that conversation stayed with her for days. 2 weeks later, on a Saturday afternoon, Estelle asked her to come along to check on a property she owned on the outskirts of Riverside, near the road out to St. John's. Emma left the children with a neighbor and climbed into the older woman's SUV, nervous and confused. They arrived at a large overgrown lot where an old house of wood and stucco leaned precariously. The strangest thing was how the entire structure tilted to one side as if a giant hand had pushed it. The walls bent at impossible angles. The roof looked ready to cave in. The windows were broken. "This is my old house," Estelle said as they walked around the building. "My grandfather built it almost 100 years ago, but it's been abandoned for decades. Nobody wants it. They say it's haunted." Emma studied the house with curiosity more than fear. She didn't believe in ghosts, but she did notice something odd. The tilt wasn't uniform. It was as if something very heavy were dragging the house toward a specific corner. "Why is it so crooked, ma'am?" Emma asked. Estelle looked at her with those penetrating gray eyes, and for a moment Emma thought an answer was coming. Instead, the older woman only smiled again with that mysterious, weary smile. "That, dear Emma, is a secret only I know." They drove back to the estate in silence, but Emma couldn't stop thinking about the crooked house and Estelle's words. Something was hidden there, something important, and though she didn't know why, she felt that secret was about to change her life forever. The answer came much sooner than she expected, and in a way she could never have predicted, because 3 days later, on a Tuesday afternoon, Estelle's son arrived from Chicago with his wife and their small child. That 5-year-old boy, curious and restless, would wander too close to the edge of the artificial lake in the gardens, and when he fell into the water screaming and flailing in terror, it would be Emma who stood nearest. It would be Emma who had to make the most important decision of her life in the space of a heartbeat. Tuesday dawned with a suffocating heat that promised a storm. Emma arrived at Laurel Ridge at 6 on the dot, as always, but found the house in unusual agitation. Estelle was in the kitchen giving orders to the other employee, a young woman named Rose who helped with the cooking. "My son is coming today from Chicago," Estelle announced, without looking up from the list she was writing. "He's bringing his wife, Victoria, and my grandson, Ben. I want everything perfect. The main bedroom on the second floor must shine. Fresh sheets, clean towels, fresh flowers in the bathroom." Emma nodded and got to work immediately. She had heard of Estelle's son, James Campbell, but had never met him. According to Rose, he was a successful engineer who rarely visited his mother, always too busy with his career and city life. "She gets nervous when he comes," Rose confided as they prepared the room. "I think it hurts her that he visits so little. He only comes out of obligation, you know. Not like us who are here every day." Emma said nothing but tucked that observation away. She knew that kind of pain, the pain of loving someone who didn't return your affection with the same intensity. James and his family arrived around 3 in the afternoon in a black BMW that kicked up a cloud of dust on the gravel drive. Emma watched from a second-floor window, a man in his mid-30s, tall and handsome, dressed in expensive casual clothes. His wife, a slender woman with dyed blonde hair and oversized sunglasses, and Ben, a 5-year-old with dark curly hair who jumped out of the car before it had fully stopped. "Ben, stand still!" Victoria yelled in a sharp, annoyed voice. "You're going to hurt yourself!" But the boy was already running toward the house, laughing and shouting as if the whole world were his playground. Estelle came out to greet them with a tense smile. Emma went down the stairs quietly so as not to get in the way, but Estelle called out, "Emma, come. I want you to meet my family." Emma approached with her hands clasped over her apron, feeling the measuring looks of James and Victoria. "This is Emma Rivera," Estelle said in a tone that sounded almost proud. "She's been working with me for 2 months. She's an exceptional woman." "Nice to meet you," Emma murmured, bowing her head slightly. James returned the greeting politely, but Victoria barely glanced at her before turning back to her mother-in-law. "Estelle, this heat is unbearable. Don't you have air conditioning in this house?" "There's air conditioning in the bedrooms," Estelle answered with forced patience. "Emma will show you where you can cool off." As Emma carried the luggage up the stairs, she could hear Ben running everywhere, touching everything, yelling questions nobody answered. The child had that wild energy of kids who have never met a boundary. The rest of the afternoon passed in a tense atmosphere. During the dinner Emma served in the main dining room, James and Victoria barely spoke to Estelle. Their conversation remained shallow and full of awkward pauses. Ben wouldn't sit still for more than a minute. He kept standing up to run around the table or yank at the tablecloth. "Ben, sit down," Victoria said without conviction, not even looking at him. Estelle watched her grandson with a mixture of love and sadness, and Emma noticed the pain in the older woman's eyes as she cleared the dishes. When Ben passed near her, Estelle reached out a hand to him, but he dodged her touch and kept running. The hurt in Estelle's gaze pierced Emma like a knife. After dinner, James and Victoria retreated to their room, claiming to be exhausted from the trip. Ben, however, was still bursting with energy. Estelle suggested he go play in the garden where there was more space. The boy bolted outside without waiting for an answer. "Emma," Estelle called once the dishes were washed, "go out and keep an eye on the boy. I don't trust his parents to pay attention." Emma stepped into the garden with a knot in her stomach. The sun was setting, painting the sky orange and purple. Ben ran between the trees, chasing imaginary butterflies and shouting at the top of his lungs. Emma followed at a cautious distance, ready to intervene if needed. The garden at Laurel Ridge was enormous, with manicured lawns, old rose bushes, and, at the far end near the property line, an artificial lake Estelle's grandfather had ordered built decades earlier. The lake was about 60 feet across, ringed by weeping willows. The water looked dark and deep in the waning light. Ben ran toward it as if drawn by a magnet. Emma quickened her pace. "Ben, don't get too close to the water. she called in a firm but kind voice. The boy glanced over his shoulder and flashed that mischievous smile children wear when they know they're about to do something forbidden. He kept running, drawing nearer to the edge. "Ben, stop!" Emma said again, now with urgency. But he crouched by the water, fascinated by something floating on the surface. Emma was 15 feet away when she saw what was about to happen a split second before it did. Ben leaned too far, lost his balance. His arms flailed in the air, searching for something to grab. And then he plunged into the lake with a splash that rang out in the evening calm like a gunshot. Emma didn't think, didn't calculate, didn't hesitate for even an instant. She hurled herself into the lake, clothes and shoes and all, bearing the full weight of her world on her shoulders. The water was icy cold and deeper than it looked. She sank to the bottom, felt the cold mud under her feet, and pushed herself up. Her eyes stung from the murky water, but she glimpsed Ben's small body sinking, his arms waving weakly, his mouth open in a silent scream. Emma swam toward him with every ounce of strength left in her body. She grabbed him around the waist just as he was about to give up and hauled him against her chest, kicking hard against the drag of water-soaked clothes pulling her down. Every movement was agony. Her lungs burned, her muscles shook with exhaustion, but she would not give in. She broke the surface with Ben in her arms, coughing and spitting water. The child sobbed in terror, clinging to her with surprising strength. Emma swam toward the shore, each stroke harder than the last, until her hands finally brushed the grass. She crawled out of the lake with Ben still pressed against her, both of them trembling and soaked to the bone. Ben coughed and cried, but he was alive. He was breathing. Emma laid him on the grass and checked his mouth to make sure there was no water trapped in his throat. He stared at her with enormous eyes full of tears and fear. "It's over," she whispered, stroking his wet hair. "You're safe now. It's all over." The shouting came a moment later. Estelle ran from the house with a speed Emma would never have believed possible for a woman her age. Behind her, James and Victoria stumbled, their faces distorted with panic. "Ben!" Victoria screamed, falling to her knees and yanking her son out of Emma's arms. "My baby! My baby!" James knelt too, frantically checking his son. Estelle, however, looked straight at Emma, her gray eyes brimming with tears. "You saved him," she whispered. "You saved him." Emma couldn't answer. All the adrenaline that had kept her going drained out at once, and she began to shiver uncontrollably. Estelle wrapped her in her own shawl and helped her up. "Rose!" she shouted toward the house. "Bring blankets and hot water, quickly." That night, after Ben was taken to the hospital as a precaution and returned with a clean bill of health, after Emma had changed clothes and drunk hot tea until the shaking subsided, Estelle summoned her to the study. The older woman sat behind a mahogany desk, hands clasped, eyes fixed on some distant point on the wall. When Emma entered, Estelle looked up. Her eyes were red, as if she had been crying. "Sit down," she said softly. Emma did as she was told, feeling oddly nervous. Estelle drew a deep breath, as though mustering courage for something difficult. "Emma, you risked your life for my grandson, a child you didn't even know. You threw yourself into that lake without thinking, without asking for anything in return, and that—" Her voice broke. "That is something I will never be able to forget, much less repay." "You don't have to repay me, ma'am," Emma said honestly. "Anyone would have done the same." "No," Estelle said firmly. "Not just anyone. Most people would have shouted for help, waited, hesitated. You didn't hesitate for a second." She stood and walked to the window. "I've been watching you for months, Emma. I've seen how you work without complaining, how you hold your head high in front of the town gossip, how you love your children with every fiber of your being, and today you confirmed what I already knew. You are an extraordinary woman." Tears threatened to spill from Emma's eyes, but she held them back. Estelle returned to the desk, opened a folder, and took out several documents. "Do you remember the crooked house I showed you 2 weeks ago?" Emma nodded, confused. "That house is yours now. I'm giving it to you as a sign of my gratitude. The deed is here. Tomorrow we'll go see the lawyer to make the transfer official." Emma was speechless. The crooked house, that leaning, old, abandoned structure, wasn't much, but it was infinitely more than she had. "Ma'am, I don't know what to say." "Don't say anything," Estelle interrupted with a smile. "Just accept it. It's yours, and whatever is inside it is yours as well." Those last words hung in the air like an unopened secret. Emma opened her mouth to ask what she meant, but Estelle had already put the documents away and was walking to the door. "Go home to your children," the older woman said. "Tomorrow we'll talk about the details." Emma stopped in the doorway as Estelle looked at her one last time. "Thank you," the millionaire said quietly. "Thank you for saving the only thing in this world that still truly matters to me." Emma walked home to her small rented house that night as if in a dream. A house. Estelle had given her a house. Crooked, old, abandoned, yes, but a house of her own. It was the first step toward a better life for her and her children. Still, Estelle's words echoed in her mind. "And whatever is inside it." What was inside that crooked house? What secret did it hide that made it lean at such a strange angle? Why had Estelle smiled with that blend of sadness and relief when she told her everything was hers? The answers were waiting in that tilted house, and when Emma finally uncovered them, she would understand that saving Ben had not been only an act of heroism. It had been the key that opened the door to a destiny that would change her life and her children's lives forever. But before the move and the discovery, she would have to face something she didn't expect. The fury of Estelle's niece and nephew, Ryan and Fiona Campbell, who had just found out that their aunt had given one of her properties to a mere maid, and they were determined not to let that stand. The news spread through Riverside like wildfire in a dry season. Emma Rivera, the poor widow who scrubbed other people's floors, now had a property in her name. Venomous tongues worked non-stop. In the market, in the square, at the church doors, the gossip grew and twisted with each retelling. "I heard she seduced the rich lady's son," Mrs. Reynolds muttered to a cluster of women. "That's why she got the house. I'm sure there's something going on between them." No, another added. "I heard the boy fell into the lake on purpose. It was all a plan to get money out of Mrs. Campbell." Emma heard the rumors while buying groceries or picking up her kids from school, and every word was a slap. Yet they no longer cut as deeply as before. She had something more important to focus on. Her children were finally going to have a roof of their own, even if that roof tilted. On Wednesday morning, Estelle picked her up in the SUV. Emma climbed in, her stomach in knots. They were going to the office of Mr. Villers, a serious lawyer with thick glasses and a graying mustache who had handled the Campbell family's legal affairs for more than 30 years. As Estelle drove through Riverside's narrow streets, Emma noticed a black car following them at a discreet distance. It was a dark Mercedes with tinted windows, and something about it sent a shiver of warning through her. The law office was in an old two-story building with wrought-iron balconies and carved wooden doors. When they entered the main room, Emma was startled to find two people already waiting, Ryan and Fiona Campbell. Ryan was a man in his early 40s, with slicked back hair and an expensive suit that couldn't hide the calculation in his eyes. Fiona, his younger sister, was 35, with a face that might have been beautiful if not for the permanent bitterness settling on her dark red lips. "Aunt Estelle," Ryan said with a honeyed tone that clashed with the ice in his eyes, "what a surprise to find you here. We didn't know you had an appointment with the lawyer." "I had no reason to inform you," Estelle replied sharply. "My affairs are none of your concern." "But Aunt," Fiona added with false sweetness, "we're family. Everything you do concerns us, especially when you're giving away family properties to strangers." Her eyes locked on Emma with a disgust so pure it almost felt tangible. Emma felt the ground open beneath her feet. How had they found out so fast? "Emma is not a stranger," Estelle said, lifting her chin with dignity. "She saved my grandson's life, something neither of you would have done." "That doesn't give her the right to receive properties that have belonged to our family for generations," Ryan snapped, dropping the polite mask. "That house was your grandfather's. Our great-grandfathers. You can't just hand it over to a domestic worker." The lawyer cleared his throat uneasily from behind his desk. "Mrs. Campbell has every legal right to dispose of her properties as she sees fit," he said in a professional tone. "The house in question has been in her name for over 20 years. There is no legal impediment to the transfer." "There is a moral impediment," Fiona insisted. "Aunt, that house is part of our family heritage. You can't do this. Mom and Dad would be turning in their graves if they knew." "As for your father," Estelle replied in a voice sharp as glass, "he was my younger brother and a greedy man who spent his life begging me for money he never repaid. So don't talk to me about what he would or wouldn't care about the family estate." The silence that followed was so dense Emma could almost feel it pressing against her skin. She wanted to disappear, to turn invisible, to be anywhere but in the middle of that family fight. But Estelle took her hand and squeezed it firmly. "Counselor," she said, without taking her eyes off her niece and nephew, "please proceed with the transfer now." The next 30 minutes were torture. Emma signed where she was told with trembling hands, her heart pounding so hard she was sure everyone could hear it. Ryan and Fiona sat in a corner, glaring at her with pure hatred, promising revenge without words. When the process was finished and the lawyer handed Emma the deed in a manila envelope, her legs felt weak. Estelle guided her toward the door, completely ignoring her relatives. Just as they reached the threshold, Ryan spoke in a low, threatening voice. "This isn't over, Aunt. We'll challenge that transfer. And as for you," his eyes bored into Emma, "enjoy your little crooked house while you can. It won't be yours for long." On the drive back to Laurel Ridge, Estelle remained silent for a long time. Finally, as they were leaving town, she spoke. "Don't pay any attention to them. They have no legal power to take that house away from you. The deed is in your name. It's yours, Emma, yours and your children's." But Emma did not feel calm. She knew men like Ryan. She knew that kind of hatred. He wouldn't stop just because the law was not on his side. That afternoon after work, she gathered her 6 children in their tiny rental and gave them the news. Ethan, the eldest, looked at her with a blend of joy and disbelief. "A house, Mom? For real?" "For real, sweetheart. It's old and a little crooked, but it's ours. We finally have a place of our own." The twins, Matthew and Sam, shouted with excitement. Lucy and Chloe threw their arms around their mother, crying with happiness. Only little Noah didn't fully understand what was happening, but he grinned because everyone else was smiling. They spent the next 3 days preparing for the move. They didn't have much to pack: clothes, a few pots, the children's worn-out toys, school notebooks, but everything felt lighter now that they knew they were taking it to their own home. Early Saturday morning, they arrived at the crooked house with the help of a neighbor who owned a pickup truck. The children jumped out and stood in front of the property, jaws hanging open. The house was even stranger than Emma remembered. The entire structure leaned toward the east, as if something incredibly heavy were pulling from that side. The red tile roof sagged in places. The stucco walls were etched with deep cracks. The wooden window frames were swollen with damp. The front porch curved at an impossible angle. Around the house, the land was choked with tall weeds and wild trees that hadn't been trimmed in decades. "Mom," Lucy whispered, taking Emma's hand, "are we really going to live here?" "Yes, sweetheart, and we're going to fix it up little by little. You'll see. It's going to be beautiful." But inside, Emma felt a stab of doubt. How was this place ever going to be livable? She had no money for repairs. She barely had enough for food. She opened the front door, which creaked like a lament, and they all walked in together. The interior was dark and smelled of old damp. The wooden floor was covered in dust and dead leaves that had blown in through broken windows. In the living room, old furniture sat beneath white sheets that looked like ghosts in the dim light. What most drew Emma's attention, though, was the strange layout. There was a large living area, a small kitchen with a wood stove, 2 bedrooms on the left, a tiny bathroom, and at the far end of a short corridor on the east side, a closed door. That door was thick wood, with an old rusty padlock hanging from an iron ring. Emma approached and laid her palm flat against it. The wood was cold. too cold to be normal. When she pressed her ear to the surface, she thought she heard something. Not exactly a sound, but a presence, as if the room itself were breathing. "Mom, what's in there?" Ethan asked, coming closer. "I don't know. It's locked." "Can we open it?" Emma studied the padlock. It was old but sturdy. They would need tools or a key. "I'll find a way to open it tomorrow," she promised. "Right now, help me clean. We've got a lot of work to do." They spent the day sweeping, mopping, pulling sheets off the old furniture, opening windows to let in fresh air. The children worked with surprising energy, singing and laughing despite their exhaustion. For them, this was an adventure, a fresh start. When the sun began to set, Emma made a simple dinner with the ingredients she had brought: refried beans, warm tortillas on the wood stove, a bit of cheese. They ate sitting on the living room floor as if on a picnic, and for the first time in a long while, Emma felt something like peace. That night she tucked the children into the 2 bedrooms, sharing worn mattresses they had found in a closet. Emma stayed up a while longer, sitting on the crooked porch, looking at the stars over the wild land. She thought of Estelle, of her generosity, of the secret hidden in her words, and whatever is inside it. Emma rose and walked back to the closed door. Moonlight slanted through broken windows, casting strange shadows on the leaning walls. She touched the padlock again and felt the same unnatural cold. "What are you hiding?" she whispered to the door. "What is so heavy that it makes this whole house tilt toward you?" There was no answer, of course, only the night silence and the distant song of crickets. But when she turned away to go back to the living room and lie down on the old sofa, she noticed something she hadn't seen before. On the doorframe, almost invisible in the dim light, a small inscription had been carved into the wood. She brought a candle closer and read the words worn by time. "What you protect with your life will one day protect you." A chill ran down her spine. Who had carved that? Estelle's grandfather. And what did it mean? Emma was about to step away when she heard something that made her freeze. It came from inside the closed room. It wasn't loud or threatening, just a subtle creak, like old wood settling, or like something very heavy shifting just a fraction of an inch. In the silence that followed, Emma would have sworn she heard something else. A deep, slow, patient breathing, as if whatever was inside that room had been waiting for years, decades, for someone to come, for the right person to open the door and discover what Estelle had kept hidden from the world. Sunday dawned under a gray sky heavy with rain. Emma woke on the old sofa, her body sore, her mind restless. The sounds from the night before had kept her from sleeping well. Every creak of the house, every groan of the wooden beams, made her think of the closed room and whatever might be behind that door. She brewed coffee on the wood stove and stepped out onto the porch to drink it while the children still slept. The land looked different under the ashy morning light, wilder, more abandoned. The trees were huge and gnarled, their branches reaching upward like arthritic fingers. The weeds brushed the house's windows. In the distance, she could see the dirt road connecting the property to the main highway. She was taking her last sip of coffee when she saw the car. The same black Mercedes that had followed them to the lawyer's office. It stopped on the road about 50 yards from the house but didn't turn off the engine. The tinted windows made it impossible to see inside, yet Emma knew with absolute certainty that it was Ryan Campbell. The car sat there for 5 long minutes, just watching, just waiting. Then, as quietly as it had come, it turned around and drove away in a cloud of reddish dust. Fear twisted in Emma's gut. That man was not going to give up, and here she was, alone with 6 children in a house barely held together. When the kids woke up, she kept them busy with cleaning and small repairs. Ethan patched a broken window using cardboard and tape. The twins pulled more weeds from the yard. Lucy and Chloe swept the porch. Even little Noah helped by picking up twigs and dropping them into a bucket. But Emma's mind was elsewhere, in the closed room, in the rusted padlock, in the carved inscription, in the sounds she had heard the night before. What you protect with your life will one day protect you. What did that mean? What could be in there that needed protecting, or that might protect her? Around noon, as the rain finally began to fall, an unexpected visitor arrived. A white SUV pulled up in front of the house and Estelle stepped out, elegantly dressed but simply, carrying a large basket covered with a cloth. "I came to see how you're settling in," she said as she climbed the crooked porch steps, carefully avoiding the worst boards, "and to bring you a few things." The basket was full of food: fresh bread, cheese, ham, fruit, milk, even a whole roasted chicken. The children crowded around, eyes shining with excitement. Tears pricked at Emma's eyes. "You shouldn't have, ma'am." "Oh, yes, I should," Estelle cut her off firmly. "And don't call me ma'am. Call me Estelle. You don't work for me anymore. You're my friend now." The word hung between them, strange and new, but true. Estelle entered the house and walked through with a sharp, appraising eye. When she reached the corridor leading to the closed door, she stopped. Her face grew serious. "Have you tried to open it?" she asked, still looking at the door. "I don't have the key, and the padlock is very old. I'd need tools to break it." Estelle slipped a hand into her jacket pocket and pulled out a small, time-darkened key. She held it out as if offering something sacred. "This is the key," she said quietly. "But before you open that door, I need to explain a few things. Can we talk alone?" Emma asked Ethan to watch his siblings and followed Estelle out onto the porch. They sat together on the crooked steps while rain fell in sheets, a curtain of privacy around them. Estelle drew a deep breath. "My grandfather, Cornelius Campbell, built this house more than 90 years ago. He was a very wealthy man, but also very cautious. He didn't trust banks. In fact, he didn't trust anyone. So he decided to store his fortune in a particular way." Emma listened in silence, her heart beating faster. "For years, my grandfather collected valuable objects: colonial art, old religious sculptures, antique jewelry, silver coins from the mining days, historical documents, rare books. He stored it all in that room, and the weight of so many objects over the decades is what made the house lean the way it does." Emma felt the world freeze around her. The sound of the rain grew distant. When she spoke, her voice was a whisper. "Are you saying that inside that room there's a fortune?" "Yes," Estelle finished for her. "A fortune my grandfather left to my grandmother, then to my father, and finally to me. But I never took it out. I never sold it. I left it in that room all these years because I knew that if my family found out its true value, they might kill me to get it. Ryan and Fiona know the house exists, that it's old and crooked, but they think it's just a useless property. My grandfather was clever. He never recorded the room's contents anywhere official. As far as the world is concerned, those things don't exist. I've kept that secret for more than 20 years. Emma felt dizzy. This couldn't be real. "Why?" she asked, her voice shaking. "Why are you telling me this? Why did you give me the house with everything inside?" Estelle looked at her with those penetrating gray eyes, now full of tenderness and deep sorrow. "Because I have no one else I can trust. My husband died 22 years ago. My son lives in Chicago and only visits out of obligation. My nieces and nephews are just waiting for me to die so they can divide what little they think I have. I'm alone, Emma, completely alone." Her voice broke, then steadied. "But then I saw you work. I saw how you endured humiliation with dignity. I saw how fiercely you loved your children. And when you dove into that lake without thinking to save my grandson, I knew you were the right person, the only one who deserved this." "I can't accept this," Emma said, jumping to her feet. "It's too much. I only did what any decent person would have done. I don't deserve a fortune for that." "It's not because of that," Estelle insisted, standing too. "It's because of who you are, because of how you've lived even in your worst moments, and because I know you'll use that fortune for something good, for your children, to give them the life they deserve." Emma wanted to argue, to refuse, But the words wouldn't come, because deep in her heart she knew this opportunity was a miracle, a second chance after so much suffering. Estelle placed the key in her palm and closed Emma's fingers around it. "Open the room when you're ready," she said. "Take your time. You don't have to decide anything now. Just know that everything in there is legally yours. The deed includes the contents. It's protected by inheritance laws no one can touch, not even my nieces and nephews." "And you don't need any of it?" Emma asked. Estelle smiled sadly. "I've already had my life. I had my chance. Now it's your turn, and your children's." They sat in silence for a long time, listening to the rain, each lost in her own thoughts. At last Estelle said goodbye, with a hug Emma hadn't expected, then drove away in her white SUV, disappearing into the curtain of water. Emma stood on the porch, the key in her hand, trembling not from cold but from a mixture of fear and anticipation. Inside that house, behind that locked door, something waited that could change her life forever, but it also made her vulnerable. Because if Ryan and Fiona ever learned the true value of what lay inside— A crack of thunder shook the sky so loudly the house itself shuddered. The children screamed in fright from inside, and Emma hurried in to comfort them. That night, after a simple dinner and after tucking the children into bed, Emma stood before the closed door with the key in her hand. The house was utterly still, save for the steady drumming of rain on the roof and the occasional creak of wood. She reached for the padlock. The key slid into the lock as if it had been waiting decades for that moment. It turned with a metallic click that echoed down the corridor like a gunshot. The padlock sprang open. Emma removed it with shaking hands and let it fall to the floor. She wrapped her fingers around the doorknob. It was icy cold. She took one deep breath, another, a third, and then pushed. The door opened slowly with a long, agonized creak. The darkness beyond was absolute. Emma couldn't see anything past the threshold, only blackness and a strange smell like old paper, aged wood, and something else she couldn't name. She groped along the wall for a light switch but found none. Of course not. The house was too old. The room had never had electricity. She would need candles or a lamp to explore the space that had been sealed for so long. She was about to close the door again when she saw something that made her heart stop. In the room's complete darkness, something gleamed. It wasn't much, just a faint glint, like light reflecting off a polished surface. But it was there, and it seemed to move slightly as if breathing. Emma stepped back, every hair on her body standing on end, and from somewhere deep inside that black room she heard a sound that almost couldn't be real. The delicate chime of metal against metal, like coins shifting or chains moving or something heavy settling back into place after being disturbed. Beneath that almost imperceptible sound came another, a sigh, not of voices but of air itself, reshaping inside the room, as if the space had been sealed so long that simply opening the door had awakened something that slept. Emma slammed the door shut, her heart hammering so hard her chest hurt. She leaned against the corridor wall, shaking, trying to catch her breath. Tomorrow she would go in with daylight streaming through the windows with candles, with her children awake in the house so she wouldn't feel so alone. Tomorrow she would face whatever lay in that room. But as she walked back to the living room to try to sleep, a part of her knew the truth. After opening that door and disturbing whatever rested inside, nothing would be the same again. Not only because of the fortune she hoped to find, but because she had released something else. Something Estelle had kept locked away for decades, a secret so heavy it had made the entire house tilt under its weight. Meanwhile, Emma had no idea that, as she tossed and turned, the black Mercedes sat once more on the dirt road outside, and Ryan was inside it, speaking in a low, urgent voice on the phone. He was giving someone precise instructions that involved the crooked house and a widow who had no idea how much danger was closing in. Monday dawned with an unsettling quiet. The rain had stopped during the night, leaving the ground soaked and the air thick with humidity. Emma woke with an aching body and a mind still trapped in the sounds she had heard behind the door. She made breakfast, hot oatmeal with a little sugar and cinnamon, the last tortillas, weak coffee. While they ate, she caught Ethan watching her with concern. "Mom, are you okay? You look tired." "I'm fine, sweetheart. I just slept badly," she lied. It wasn't just that. All night she'd had the feeling someone was watching the house from outside. Several times she got up to look through the broken windows but saw only darkness and the trees shifting in the wind. After breakfast, she asked Ethan to stay with his siblings. She took 3 thick candles she'd found in a kitchen drawer, a lighter, and walked down the corridor with determined steps. She couldn't keep putting this off. She needed to know what was in that room. She needed to understand why Estelle had given her something so valuable. The door stood exactly as she'd left it, closed, the padlock on the floor. Emma lit the candles, setting 2 on the floor in the corridor as backup and holding the 3rd firmly in her hand. Then she pushed the door open. This time it swung without resistance, as if the room had accepted its fate. The candlelight seeped into the darkness, and what Emma saw took her breath away. The room was larger than she thought, perhaps 16 by 20 feet, and every inch was occupied. The walls were lined with dark wooden shelves, and on those shelves was everything. Objects meticulously stacked, wrapped in fabric, organized into categories that revealed the orderly mind of Estelle's grandfather. Emma stepped forward, raising the candle for a better look, her breathing quickening. On the nearest shelves hung framed religious paintings, colonial-era Madonnas with gold halos, saints with serene expressions, crucifixes carved from ancient wood. Emma didn't know much about art, but even she could see they were old, centuries old. Beyond them sat wooden boxes with brass locks, filled with books, hundreds of them. She opened one box gently and lifted out the top volume. It was huge, bound in embossed leather, its pages yellowed by time. The title was in archaic print, almost illegible, but she could make out a date, 1683, 340 years old. Her legs shaking, she moved toward the center of the room, where several iron trunks stood, their locks already open, as if Estelle had wanted her to have easy access. Emma knelt by the first and opened it. Coins, hundreds, perhaps thousands of silver coins, glittered in the candlelight like tiny stars. She picked one up with trembling fingers. It was heavy and cold, stamped with a coat of arms and letters she couldn't quite read, but she knew. This was sterling silver, likely from the old mining days. The second trunk held jewelry, strings of large pearls, rings with precious stones that flashed with color when the light caught them, gold bracelets, antique brooches studded with diamonds. Emma knew nothing about fine jewelry, but it was clear these were no simple trinkets. They were historical treasures. The third trunk almost made her cry. Inside lay neatly stacked silver bars, each the size of a brick. She counted 30, then stopped as tears blurred her vision. And still that wasn't all. More shelves lined the far wall, carved religious statues so detailed they looked alive, gold and silver chalices, rolled manuscripts in leather tubes, hand-drawn antique maps, official documents with heavy red wax seals, small pre-Columbian figures of jade and obsidian that Estelle's grandfather must have collected in his travels. In one corner, wrapped in velvet, lay unframed canvases. Emma carefully unwrapped one and nearly dropped the candle. It was a portrait of a 17th century woman in silk and lace, staring outward with piercing eyes. A small signature graced the corner, a painter's name Emma didn't recognize, but the skill was unmistakable. The colors, the luminous skin, the almost living gaze. This was a masterpiece. She set the painting down gently and sank to the wooden floor, no longer able to stand. All around her, in the room that had made the house lean under its weight, lay a fortune beyond anything she had ever imagined. It wasn't just money, it was history, art, the legacy of generations accumulated with patience and vision. And now it belonged to her and her 6 children. She didn't know how long she sat there, crying silently as the candle burned lower. She thought of Daniel, who had worked himself to death without a complaint. She thought of the humiliations she had endured in Riverside, of the nights her kids had gone to bed hungry, of the prayers she had whispered, begging God for just one chance to give her children a better life. And now the answer had come, not in the form of a better job or a lucky break, but through Estelle, a lonely woman who had seen in Emma something no one else ever had: dignity, kindness, courage. What you protect with your life will one day protect you. Now she understood the inscription on the doorframe. Estelle's grandfather had protected this fortune with his life, keeping it hidden. Now that same fortune would protect Emma and her children, giving them schooling, healthcare opportunities, the future they deserved. But first she had to protect it, because if Ryan and Fiona ever found out what was here... Her thoughts were interrupted by Ethan's voice from the living room. "Mom! Mom, come quick!" Emma jumped to her feet, set the candle carefully on the floor and ran out. She found her 6 children clustered at a window, faces pale with fear. "What is it?" "There's a man outside," Ethan whispered. "He's taking pictures of the house." Emma peered through the broken glass and felt her stomach knot. Ryan Campbell stood in the front yard in broad daylight, holding a professional camera. He was photographing the house from every angle: the front, the sides, the sagging roof, the cracked walls. Worst of all, he wore an expensive suit and a satisfied smile that boded nothing good. Emma stepped out onto the porch, her heart pounding in her throat. Ryan stopped taking photos and gave her that smile that felt more like a threat than a greeting. "Good morning, Emma. I hope I'm not interrupting." "What are you doing here?" she demanded. "Just documenting the property," he replied smoothly. "My lawyer advised me to record the current condition of this house for the legal file, you see. Mrs. Campbell already gave me the deed. The house is legally mine. You can't change that." Ryan's smile widened, though his eyes remained icy. "Oh, I'm not trying to take the house away, at least not directly. That would be difficult, but there are other ways to resolve this." He slung the camera over his shoulder and walked closer. "Look at this place. It's about to fall down. No electricity, no running water, huge cracks in the walls, a sagging roof. Do you really think it's safe to live here with 6 small children?" A shiver of alarm slid down Emma's spine. "I can fix it up over time." "With what money?" Ryan's voice hardened. "You're a poor woman, Emma, a widow with no resources. This house needs repairs that would cost tens of thousands of dollars, maybe more. How will you pay for that?" "That's none of your business," she answered. "Actually, it is the business of the Department of Building Safety," he said with a triumphant smile. "Turns out I have a friend who works there. Yesterday, I happened to mention that a widow with 6 kids had moved into a structurally unsafe house. He told me they'll be coming out to inspect it, probably tomorrow. And when they see the condition of this place," he shrugged, "they'll condemn it. They'll forbid you to live here. Then what will you do?" Emma felt as if the world were collapsing around her. He was right. The house was a wreck. If the inspectors declared it uninhabitable... "But don't worry," Ryan went on with false compassion. "I have a solution. I'll buy the house from you. I'll give you $3,000 cash today. It's more than this ruin is worth. With that money, you can rent something decent in town while you look for work." $3,000. For someone in her situation, it was a fortune. But compared to what lay in the secret room, it was nothing. Absolutely nothing. "It's not for sale," Emma said firmly, though she was trembling inside. Ryan's smile vanished. His face hardened into stone. "You're going to regret this," he said in a low, threatening voice. "My aunt made a mistake when she gave you this property, and I'm going to correct that mistake one way or another." He turned toward the Mercedes, then glanced back one last time. "Oh, by the way, I've told a few people in Riverside about this house and your good luck. You know how people are in small towns. Nosy, curious. I imagine you'll soon have plenty of visitors. People asking what's so special about this old place that my aunt gave it to you. People speculating. People investigating." The message was clear. Ryan would stir rumors and draw attention to the property. If enough people started asking questions, eventually someone would discover the secret room. The Mercedes roared away, kicking up dust. Emma stood on the crooked porch, shaking with rage and fear. Her children came outside and clustered around her. "Mom, "Who was that man?" Lucy asked in a small voice. "Nobody important, sweetheart. Just a bad man who's going to learn he can't intimidate us." But inside, Emma knew the truth. She was in serious trouble. Ryan would use every resource he had to force her out. She had no money for lawyers, no political connections, nothing but a crooked house filled with treasures she couldn't sell without attracting dangerous questions. She needed help, and there was only one person in the world who could give it. "Ethan," she said, turning to her oldest, "I need you to stay and look after your brothers and sisters. I'm going out for a while." "Where are you going?" "To see Estelle. This can't wait." Emma walked down the dirt road to the highway, where she flagged down a bus into Riverside, then took a taxi she couldn't afford out to Laurel Ridge. Rose opened the service door. "Emma, what are you doing here? I thought you didn't work anymore." "I need to speak to Estelle. It's urgent." Rose let her in and went to get the older woman. Emma waited in the kitchen, hands clasped, heart racing. When Estelle entered, worry etched her face. "What happened? Are you all right?" "The children are fine," Emma said straight away. "Ryan came to the house this morning. He took pictures. He says he's calling the building safety department to condemn the property, and he's spreading rumors in town so people will wonder what's special about that house." Estelle closed her eyes and let out a long, tired sigh. "I knew he'd do something like this. My nephew never accepts defeat." She opened her eyes again, now full of resolve. "But he has no idea who he's dealing with, and neither does the building safety department. They can't take the house from you if you don't want to sell. The deed is legal and airtight. But if they declare it unsafe, I can't live there. Then he'll keep pushing until I have no choice but to sell. Not if we fix the house first. I don't have money for repairs, and you've already given me too much. I can't ask you for more." Estelle took her hands. "Emma, you opened the room." Emma nodded, tears threatening. "You saw what's inside?" "Yes, I saw everything. I can't believe it's real or that it's mine." "Then you already know the answer," Estelle said softly. "Sell a piece, just one, something small that won't attract attention. Use that money to repair the house, make it safe, and when building safety comes, they won't have a single legal reason to condemn it." Emma stared at her, wide-eyed. "Sell one piece, but how? Where? To whom?" "I'll help you. I know people, discreet collectors who pay well and don't ask awkward questions." Estelle smiled faintly. "My grandfather wasn't the only one in the family with connections, you know." For the first time that day, hope stirred in Emma's chest. "Go back to your house," Estelle continued. "Choose something from the room, valuable but not too large. Bring it to me early tomorrow and let me handle the rest." Emma hugged her, unable to express her gratitude in words. Estelle hugged her back, and in that moment, the two lonely women clung to each other like castaways in a storm. When Emma returned to the crooked house, the sun was setting, painting the sky orange and purple. Her children ran to meet her, relieved. She made them a simple dinner and put them to bed early, singing the songs Daniel used to sing when he was alive. Then, when the house was quiet, Emma went back to the secret room with a candle in hand. She knelt in front of the trunks and began examining their contents carefully, searching for something she could sell without feeling she was betraying Estelle's gift. At last, at the bottom of the second trunk, she found a necklace. It was beautiful, but not ostentatious. A thin gold chain with an oval locket containing a miniature portrait of a young woman. The workmanship was exquisite, clearly old, likely early 19th century, valuable, but not as valuable as the silver bars or the large colonial paintings. Emma held it up in the candlelight, admiring the tiny details, then slipped it into a small cloth pouch and tucked it into her pocket. "Tomorrow," she thought, "tomorrow we start changing our fate." She did not see the figure watching the house from the trees across the road. She didn't notice the glint of binoculars catching the moonlight or hear the click of a camera in the darkness. Ryan Campbell was no longer acting alone. He had hired someone to watch the house day and night, to report every movement, every entrance, every exit, every visitor. When they finally discovered what secret the crooked house hid, when they finally understood why Estelle had given it to a maid, the real war would begin. Tuesday dawned under a clear sky that promised intense heat. Emma rose before sunrise, washed as best she could with cold water from the rusty bathroom tap, and dressed in her cleanest clothes. The antique necklace rested in its pouch in her pocket, heavier for its meaning than its weight. She left Ethan in charge again with strict instructions. Don't open the door to anyone. Keep the remaining windows shut, and if they saw Ryan's black Mercedes, hide in the back room and wait until he left. "Mom, you're scaring me," Ethan said, frowning. He was 14 but often seemed older, especially since his father's death. "Don't be scared, sweetheart. Just be careful. I'll be back before noon." The trip to Laurel Ridge felt endless. Every minute away from her children was agony, but when Estelle herself opened the front door, Emma felt she could breathe again. Come in, I've been expecting you," Estelle said. In the older woman's private study, Emma pulled out the necklace with trembling fingers. Estelle examined it by the window, turning the locket under the light with an expert eye. "It's beautiful. Late 19th century, I'd say. Probably European, brought over during that era when wealthy families imported everything from overseas." She raised her eyes. "You chose well. It's valuable but not so rare that it will raise too many eyebrows." "How much do you think it's worth?" Emma asked. "On the open market, with full documentation and certification, between $10,000 and $15,000, but we're not going to the open market." Estelle rewrapped the necklace. "I have a friend in Phoenix, Edmund Sanders, a very discreet private collector. I've sold him pieces before. He doesn't ask questions and pays in cash. He can give us about $8,000 for this. Today." Emma's knees nearly buckled. $8,000, more money than she had ever seen in her entire life. "Really?" "Really. But we'll have to go now. Edmund will only be in his office until 2, then he's flying to Chicago. If we want to do this today, we must leave at once." The drive to Phoenix took just over an hour. Estelle navigated the highway with calm confidence while Emma stared out the window without really seeing the scenery. Her mind was back at the crooked house, with her children, with the man Ryan had hired to watch them. They reached an upscale neighborhood of huge homes, hidden behind high walls and electric gates. Estelle stopped in front of a modern glass and steel building. A security guard checked their IDs before letting them in. Edmund Sanders was a slender, elegant man in his 60s with white hair and gold-rimmed glasses. His office looked more like a museum than a workplace. Colonial paintings on the walls, glass cases full of ancient sculptures, dark wood desks piled with rare books. "Estelle, my dear, always a pleasure," he greeted in a cultivated voice. Then he glanced at Emma with curiosity. "And who is your friend?" "Someone who needs your discretion," Estelle replied. "As always." Edmund nodded, understanding. She showed him the necklace. He examined it with a jeweler's loupe for several long minutes that felt like hours, then smiled. 19th century, 18-karat gold, French miniature portrait, I'd say. The technique is impeccable. I can offer you $8,000 cash right now. It felt almost too easy, too fast. "You don't need paperwork, documents?" Emma asked. Edmund smiled kindly. "In my line of work, provenance is sometimes better left uncharted. I trust Estelle's judgment. If she says it's legitimate, that's all I need." 20 minutes later, Emma left the office holding a manila envelope filled with $50 and $100 bills, $8,000 in tangible hope. On the drive back, Estelle gave her practical advice. "Look for Arthur Fields. He's the best contractor in Riverside, the most honest. Tell him I sent you. He can stabilize your house in 2 weeks if he works quickly. Use $4,000 for repairs. Save the rest for emergencies and your children. And if Ryan tries to stop the work, he can't. It's your property. But you must move fast, Emma. Very fast." When she returned to the crooked house, it was almost 3 in the afternoon. Her children rushed out to hug her, laughing as she squeezed them. She showed them the envelope without saying exactly how much money was inside and explained they would fix the house. "Really, Mom?" Lucy asked, eyes wide. "We'll have electricity and hot water?" "Yes, sweetheart. Everything we need. That afternoon, Emma walked to town and found Arthur Fields in his workshop, a 50-year-old man with huge hands and a sun-weathered face. When she mentioned Estelle's name, he straightened with respect. "If Mrs. Campbell sent you, then I'll work for you. When do we start?" "Tomorrow, and I need you to work fast. Very fast." Arthur arrived Wednesday at dawn with a crew of 5 men. They got started immediately, reinforcing the main beams, repairing wall cracks with fresh mortar, replacing the broken windows, installing electrical wiring with the help of a town electrician, connecting the plumbing, sanding and varnishing the wooden floors. The place turned into a hive of activity. The children helped carry tools and sweep sawdust. Emma cooked hearty meals for the workers and supervised every detail. True to his word, Arthur worked from sunrise to sunset without rest. On Thursday afternoon, when Emma went into town to buy more supplies, she heard the whispers at the market. People say she found money hidden in that house. "No, I heard Estelle is secretly giving her more money. Why else would she give a house away if there wasn't something valuable there?" Emma gritted her teeth and kept walking. The rumors Ryan had planted were sprouting everywhere, but she couldn't do anything except push the repairs forward. Friday brought the news she'd been dreading. Arthur found her in the kitchen preparing lunch. "Ms. Rivera, there are some men outside. They say they're from the building safety department." Emma's heart lurched. She went to the porch and saw a white truck parked on the road. 2 men in blue shirts and carrying clipboards stepped down. Behind them, in his familiar black Mercedes, sat Ryan with a smug smile. "Good morning," said one of the inspectors, a stocky man in his 40s. "I'm Engineer Morales from the City Building Safety Department. We received a report that this structure may be unsafe. We're here to inspect it." "Of course," Emma said steadily, though she shook inside. "As you can see, we're making repairs." Arthur came over with rolled-up plans under his arm. "Engineer Morales, I'm Arthur Fields, licensed contractor. These are the structural repair plans we're following. Everything is to code and safe." The inspector studied the plans with a frown, while his colleague walked the property, taking photos, measuring cracks, inspecting beams. Ryan watched from his car, arms folded, his face tense. The inspection lasted more than 2 hours. Emma waited with her stomach in a knot as they examined every corner of the house. At last, Morales returned with a serious expression. "Ms. Rivera, this house was in very poor condition. Some of the main beams were rotten. The roof was at risk of collapse. There was no electrical system, no safe plumbing. It was dangerous." Emma felt her world slipping, but the engineer continued. "However, the repairs you're making are appropriate and professional. If Mr. Fields continues the work as planned, in about a week this structure will be completely habitable and safe." He signed his clipboard. "There is no order to vacate. You may stay here while the work is completed. Just be careful with the children around the construction areas." Emma had to lean against the wall to keep from collapsing. Arthur smiled discreetly. The other workers exhaled in relief. Ryan burst from his car, his face flushed with rage. "This is impossible. The house is a public hazard." "Mr. Campbell," Morales said coolly, "our inspection does not support your claims. This property is undergoing proper repairs. There is no legal reason to condemn it." "You don't understand," Ryan protested. "That woman has something that belongs to my family. My aunt gave it to her illegally. There's a fortune hidden in this house." "Property disputes are not our department," the engineer interrupted. "If you have legal issues with the owner, take them to court. Good day." The inspectors left in their truck. Ryan stood by his Mercedes, shaking with fury. He looked at Emma, eyes filled with hate. "Where did you get the money?" he asked in a low, dangerous voice. "Where did you get the money to pay for all this?" "That's none of your business," she answered, surprising herself with how steady her voice sounded. "My aunt gave you more than the house, didn't she?" he hissed, stepping closer. "There's something else, something hidden here. That's why the house leans. That's why she gave it to you. There's something valuable." "Get off my property," Emma said, her voice ringing. "Now." Ryan stared at her for a long moment, then smiled. a dangerous smile of someone who has just made up his mind. "This isn't over," he whispered. "If my aunt gave you anything besides this house, I'll find out, and when I do—" He left the sentence unfinished, got into his car, and sped off. Arthur laid a big, reassuring hand on Emma's shoulder. "That man is dangerous, ma'am. Be careful." The following days were a whirlwind of work. Arthur and his crew labored from dawn to dusk. The house transformed before their eyes. The walls were reinforced and painted a warm white. The roof was fully repaired with new tiles. The windows gleamed with solid wooden frames and clean glass. Electricity lit every room. Hot water flowed through new pipes. Most remarkable was the tilt. Arthur had installed structural supports that made the house appear much less crooked. It would never be perfectly straight without a complete rebuild, but it was now stable and safe. On Sunday, when the work was almost finished, Estelle came to visit. She walked through the house with tears in her eyes. "My grandfather would be proud," she whispered. "You've brought this place back to life." That night, after Estelle left, Emma tucked her children into their newly painted bedrooms, where fresh beds she'd bought with part of the remaining money waited for them. The kids fell asleep smiling, exhausted but happy. Emma sat on the now sturdy porch, watching the stars. For the first time in a long time, she felt peace. They had done it. Against all odds, against Ryan's threats, against the town's rumors, they had turned the crooked house into a home. The peace didn't last. At 3 a.m, Emma woke to an odd sound, a creak. Not the normal creak of an old structure settling, but the creak of footsteps, careful and deliberate. She got up without turning on the lights and walked barefoot into the living room. Moonlight filtered through the new windows, casting long shadows on the floor. Everything looked normal. Maybe it was her imagination. Then she heard another sound, from outside, on the east side of the house, where the secret room lay. Emma ran to the nearest window and peered out. What she saw froze her blood. A man dressed in black stood outside with a small flashlight, examining the outer wall of the secret room, running his hands along the old stucco, measuring something with a tape. Beside him, in the darkness, stood Ryan. They were searching. They were trying to understand why that side of the house leaned so much. They were moments away from discovering the room, and Emma, alone in the darkness with 6 sleeping children, knew the real war had just begun. If Ryan discovered what was in there, if he grasped the true value of Estelle's gift, he would stop at nothing to take it from her, absolutely nothing. She watched from the dark window as Ryan and the man in black ran a portable metal detector along the wall. The device beeped steadily. Ryan smiled in the dark, the predatory grin of a hunter who has found his prey. Emma backed away from the window, her heart pounding so hard it hurt. She had to act. But how? If she went out to confront them, they might turn violent. If she called the police, they would be gone by the time officers arrived. Worst of all, now Ryan knew there was something metallic, something heavy, something valuable behind that wall. She rushed to the new phone they had installed and dialed Laurel Ridge. The phone rang 4, 5, 6 times. Finally, Estelle's sleepy voice answered. "Hello? Estelle, it's Emma. Ryan is here. He's outside the house with someone. They have a metal detector. They're scanning the wall by the room. They know there's something there." The pause on the other end felt endless, though it lasted only a second. "Don't go out. Lock all the doors. I'm coming now and I'm bringing help." The line went dead. Emma hung up with trembling hands and ran to check the locks. Then she went to the bedrooms. Ethan was awake, sitting on his bed, eyes wide with fear. "Mom, I heard noises outside." "I know, sweetheart. Stay here with your brothers and sisters. Don't come out no matter what." Ethan nodded, though she could see the terror in his eyes. He was still so young, far too young to face this kind of danger. Emma returned to the living room just as a heavy blow landed on the front door, loud, commanding, anything but friendly. "Emma, open the door. I know you're awake." Ryan's voice was different now. There was no pretense, no politeness, only raw anger and greed. "Get off my property or I'm calling the police," she shouted from behind the door. "Go ahead. By the time they get here, I'll have found what I'm looking for." She heard footsteps retreating from the front door. Emma ran to a side window and saw Ryan and the man in black moving toward the back of the house, toward the secret room. Ryan carried something heavy, a sledgehammer. They were going to break through the wall. Emma rushed down the corridor and pressed her back against the inner side of the secret room's door, as if her body could stop what was coming. She heard the first blow of the sledgehammer against the outer wall, then the second, then the third. Each strike made the whole structure shudder. "Stop!" she shouted at the top of her lungs. "This is my property. What you're doing is illegal." The blows continued. Old stucco crumbled. Emma could hear chunks falling outside. They were about to smash a hole in the wall, about to see what lay within. Then, like an answer to a desperate prayer, she heard vehicles roaring up the dirt road, several of them. She ran to the front window and saw 3 trucks turning into the property with their lights blazing. The first was Estelle's white SUV. The other 2 were police cruisers from Riverside. Estelle climbed out, followed by 4 uniformed officers and a man in a suit Emma recognized, Chief Barnes, the town's police chief. The hammer blows at the back ceased abruptly. Emma dashed outside and found Ryan and the man in black standing beside a hole the size of a basketball in the outer wall. Ryan still held the hammer, his face pale in the glare of the police flashlights. "Officer, arrest these men," Emma cried, pointing at them with a shaking finger. "They're destroying my property." Chief Barnes stepped forward, his expression severe. He looked at the hole, then at Ryan, then at the man in black who'd tried to slip into the shadows. "Ryan Campbell," the chief said in a voice that brooked no argument, "you're under arrest for vandalism and trespassing. You have the right to—" "Wait," Ryan interrupted, desperate. "You don't understand. This woman has something that belongs to my family. My aunt gave it to her illegally. There's a fortune hidden in this house." "A fortune?" the chief asked skeptically. "What kind of fortune?" Ryan pointed at the hole. "In there." The metal detector confirmed it. "There's gold, silver, valuable objects in that room. My grandfather hid them there decades ago, and now this woman—" "Whatever is in that house," interrupted a firm voice, "belongs legally to Emma Rivera." Estelle stepped forward. "The deed we signed includes the entire contents of the property. Everything inside is hers by law." "But Aunt, that was our inheritance," Ryan protested. "You can't just give it to a stranger." "I can do whatever I want with my property, and I did," Estelle replied coldly. She turned to Chief Barnes. "I have certified copies of the deed right here. Everything was done legally before a lawyer. This woman saved my grandson's life. I gave her the house and everything in it to show my gratitude. My nephew has no legal claim to any of it." The chief examined the documents carefully, then looked at Ryan with disgust. "The papers are in order. You have no rights here, Mr. Campbell. What you did tonight is a serious crime." He signaled the officers. "Take him." "No, wait," Ryan shouted as the officers closed in. "I can pay you, I can—" But the handcuffs were already on his wrists. The man in black was also arrested. The cruisers pulled away with their prisoners, their lights flashing as Ryan shouted threats that faded into the night. When the noise died away, silence settled around the crooked house. Emma sank to the damp grass, trembling from head to toe. It had all happened so fast, so close to disaster. Estelle knelt beside her and pulled her into a fierce hug. "It's over," she whispered. "It's over. You're safe." "And if he comes back? If he hires more people? If—" "He won't," Estelle said with absolute certainty. "Chief Barnes owes me more than a few favors. Ryan will spend at least a month in jail for this, and when he gets out, there'll be a restraining order keeping him at least 500 yards from this property. And besides—" a small, tired smile touched her face. "I'm seeing my lawyer tomorrow. I'm changing my will. Everything I own will go to charity when I die. Ryan and Fiona won't receive a single dollar. When they find out, they'll be too busy fighting my will to bother you." Emma looked at her, tears running down her cheeks. "Why are you doing all this for me?" "Because you are the daughter I never had," Estelle said simply. "Because in you, I saw something I lost long ago. genuine goodness in a world ruled by greed. And because my grandfather, Cornelius, would have wanted his fortune to end up with someone who would use it for good, someone like you. In the days that followed, Arthur finished repairing the damage Ryan had done to the wall. The crooked house, now reinforced and beautiful, became the envy of the neighborhood. With Estelle's guidance, Emma began selling pieces of the treasure very carefully. A necklace here, a painting there, always through Edmund, always with absolute discretion. She never sold enough to attract attention, but she sold enough to transform her family's life. She bought a larger home in town, close to the best schools, while keeping the crooked house as an investment property, renting it to a young family who filled it with laughter and life. The secret room was carefully emptied, its contents transferred to a safe deposit box in Phoenix, accessible only to Emma and Estelle. Ethan began tutoring with outstanding teachers and quickly revealed a surprising gift for mathematics. The twins, Matthew and Sam, joined a youth soccer program that discovered their natural talent on the field. Lucy started piano lessons and filled the new house with music. Chloe joined a folk dance group and shone in every performance. Little Noah, now 3, attended a preschool where he played and learned among other children. For the first time in her life, Emma had room to breathe, to think, to dream. She enrolled in night classes to finish high school, which she had left behind when she married Daniel. She discovered that she loved reading, that she was intelligent and capable, far more than anyone had ever told her. Estelle became a constant presence in their lives, dining with them at least twice a week, attending the twins' matches, listening to Lucy's piano, reading stories to Chloe and Noah. She turned into the grandmother the children had never had. 6 months after Ryan's arrest, Emma was in her new kitchen, making mole for a family dinner, when the doorbell rang. She opened it and found James Campbell on the threshold with Victoria and Ben. "Emma," James began awkwardly, "I know we don't know each other well. I know I haven't been the best son to my mother, but she talks about you all the time, about your children, about how you saved my boy's life." He faltered. "I wanted to thank you in person and apologize for not doing it sooner." Ben, now 6, hid shyly behind his father's legs, but his eyes lit up when he saw Emma. "You're the lady who saved me from the lake," he said. Emma knelt to his height and smiled. "Hi, Ben. How have you been?" "Good. Dad says you're a hero. He says if it weren't for you—" His voice trailed off, his eyes filling with tears. Emma hugged him gently. "You're okay. That's what matters." That night's dinner was loud and chaotic and perfect. Emma's kids and Ben played in the yard. James and Victoria sat with Estelle at the table, talking about moving back to Riverside to be closer to her. From the kitchen, Emma watched the scene with a heart so full she thought it might burst. "What are you thinking?" Estelle asked as she appeared beside her with 2 cups of coffee. "I'm thinking of Daniel," Emma answered honestly. "I wish he were here to see this, to see our kids happy and healthy and with a future, to know everything turned out all right in the end." "He knows," Estelle said softly. "Wherever he is, he knows, and he's proud of you." A year after receiving the crooked house, Emma sat once more on its restored front steps on a Sunday afternoon. The young family who rented it tended it lovingly, and Emma visited now and then just to remember. Estelle arrived in her white SUV and joined her on the repaired stairs. "Do you know what my grandfather Cornelius said to me before he died?" she asked suddenly. "I was 12. He was in bed, very ill, but he took my hand and said, 'Estelle, money is only paper and metal. What matters is what you do with it. Use it to protect those who deserve it, to give opportunities to people with good hearts and bad luck. That's the only way money has real value.'" Estelle's gray eyes filled with tears as she looked at Emma. "For decades I didn't understand what he meant. I kept his fortune hidden here, afraid it would fall into the wrong hands. But when I saw you dive into the lake without thinking, when I saw your courage and your pure heart, I finally understood. You are the reason he saved that fortune. You are the person who deserved to find it." Emma couldn't speak. She just hugged Estelle and cried tears of gratitude and relief and simple, overwhelming joy. Several years later, Ethan was accepted to the National University with a full scholarship to study engineering. The twins played on the youth team of a professional soccer club. Lucy gave piano concerts in the city. Chloe won a statewide dance competition, and Noah, now 5, read books meant for much older children. Emma had finished high school and was studying business administration at the local university. She had founded a small charity to help widows in situations like the one she had lived through, offering jobs, training, emotional support. She named it the Cornelius Campbell Foundation in honor of Estelle's grandfather. The Crooked House, once on the verge of collapse, had become a legend in Riverside. People told the story of the poor widow who received a house that seemed cursed but held a miracle inside. A house that leaned not because it was doomed, but because it bore the weight of love and generosity from a man who had hidden his fortune, waiting for the right person to find it. That person was not his own blood, but someone whose heart matched what he valued most: humility, bravery, kindness. Many years after the night Emma had watched Daniel die on the workshop floor, she stood in front of the Crooked House with her 6 children, all dressed smartly. Estelle stood beside her, now 65, but still strong and dignified. "Mom," said Ethan, now a grown man and taller than she was, "are you ready?" Emma looked at the house one last time. The house that had once leaned under the weight of a secret. The house that had given her a second chance. The house that had changed her life and her children's lives forever. "Yes," she said firmly, "I'm ready." That afternoon, Emma was on her way to something she had never imagined: Ethan's university graduation. She would watch her son, the son of a dead carpenter and a poor widow, receive his engineering degree. Then they would all go out to dinner at a nice restaurant, the 8 of them together, celebrating not only the diploma but the long road they had traveled, one that had begun with tragedy, continued through humiliation and poverty, and found redemption in the simplest, deepest act: kindness. Kindness in saving a life without asking anything in return. Kindness in recognizing that act and rewarding it. Kindness that spreads like ripples in water, touching lives, transforming destinies, creating miracles. As they walked toward the new car Emma had bought with honestly earned money and careful investments, Noah took her hand. "Mom, is it true that we used to be poor?" he asked. Emma knelt beside him and smoothed his hair. "Yes, sweetheart. We were poor once, but we were never miserable because we always had love. And now we have love and opportunities. What you must never forget is that love came first." "And the Crooked House?" the boy asked, curious. "Why was it crooked?" Emma smiled and looked at the leaning structure shining in the afternoon sun. "Because sometimes the most valuable things in life are so heavy, so important, that they make everything around them lean a little. That doesn't mean they're broken. It means they're full of history, of love, of secrets waiting for the right person to discover them." "And you were the right person," Noah said. "That's what they say," Emma replied, hugging him. "But I think the right person is simply someone who chooses to do the right thing when no one else will. Someone who protects what they love with their life, because in the end, what you protect with your life will one day protect you." As the car rolled away down the dirt road, leaving behind the Crooked House that had changed them forever, Emma knew with absolute certainty that it had all been worth it. Every tear, every humiliation, every moment of fear and doubt. In the end, kindness always finds its reward, not always when we expect it or in the form we imagine, but always, eventually, life gives back what we give to it. She had given everything she had, her work, her dignity, her courage, and life had given her a miracle hidden inside a leaning house, waiting patiently for the right person to open the door and discover that the greatest treasures are not those that glitter in gold and silver, but those built with love, guarded with bravery, and shared with a generous heart that never forgets where it came from or whom it has to thank. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next ones. May God bless you.